In this video, you'll see what it's really like to walk through the castle doors of Hogwarts. Not as a legend or a hero, but as a terrified first-year student stepping into a world far bigger, older, and more dangerous than anything they imagined. From floating candles and shifting staircases to forbidden corridors and ancient secrets hidden deep beneath the castle. This isn't the Hogwarts you read about. This is the real journey, the one that turns a clueless kid into a wizard, destined to shape the future of magic itself. Most students come here just to learn spells and pass exams. But by the end of this story, one student will uncover a force. Even the founders tried to hide a power so old and so dangerous that once it's awakened, nothing in the wizarding world will ever be the same. Before we dive in though, I want to try something fun. Drop a comment and let me know where in the world you're watching from and what time it is there. Someone commented their city in a past video, and it blew my mind to see people watching from places I never expected. So I'd love to see how far this little Hogwarts adventure reaches. Alright, grab your wand, keep your eyes open, and whatever you do, don't go near the third floor corridor. Because once this story begins, there's no turning back. The moment the Scarlet steam engine shuddered to life and pulled away from King's Cross Station, I felt the world I had always known slipping further and further behind me. Even stepping through the brick barrier to platform 9 and 3 quarters had felt like a dream, a single heartbeat where magic and reality collided. But now, as the train gathered speed, that dream was becoming my new life. The countryside rushed past in streaks of green and gold, hedgerows blurring into watercolor, but I hardly noticed. Inside the carriage, everything felt electric. The air was alive with a restless, unspoken energy, a mixture of nerves and anticipation that hummed beneath every breath. I watched enchanted sweets leap from their boxes and hover before being caught by eager hands, their movements defying every law of nature I'd grown up believing. Robes rustled as students shifted in their seats, some gazing out the window in quiet wonder, while others buried themselves in books already worn from years of use. Every so often, the train lurched around a bend, and my reflection in the glass stared back at me, wide-eyed, slightly overwhelmed, but utterly captivated. Somewhere beyond those rushing fields waited a castle older than memory and a destiny I could scarcely imagine. Platform 9 3/4 was just the threshold. Now I was crossing into something far greater than I had ever dared to dream. Arriving at Hogsmeade Station, the night air was crisp and smelled of pine. Fur's years over here. A booming voice called out. It belonged to a giant of a man with a kind face and a bushy beard. Hagrid. He led us down a winding path to a fleet of small boats floating on a vast, black lake. As we sailed across, the castle came into view. It wasn't just a castle, it was a universe of towers, turrets, and glowing windows, reaching for a sky full of more stars than I'd ever seen. A collective gasp went through our little flotilla. It was real. It was all real. We were led through massive oak doors into the great hall. The ceiling was bewitched to look like the night sky, and thousands of candles floated in midair. The entire school was watching us as we walked towards the front, a line of trembling first years. There, on a simple wooden stool, sat a frayed, ancient-looking wizard's hat. The sorting hat. One by one, names were called. I watched as some went to the cheering red and gold of Gryffindor, others to the proud green and silver of Slytherin, the wise blue and bronze of Ravenclaw, or the loyal yellow and black of Hufflepuff. My heart was hammering against my ribs. What if I didn't belong anywhere? Then my name was called. The walk to the stool felt a mile long. The hat was placed on my head, and it slipped down over my eyes. A small voice whispered in my ear, interesting. Plenty of courage, I see. A thirst to prove yourself. But where to put you? I squeezed my eyes shut, thinking of bravery, of loyalty, of wit, ... I just wanted a home. After what felt like an eternity, the hat shouted out its decision to the entire hall. The table for my new house erupted in cheers, and I practically floated over, a massive grin plastered on my face. A prefect with a shiny badge shook my hand. "Welcome home," they said. The feast that followed was magical in every sense of the word. Dishes appeared out of nowhere, filled with every kind of food imaginable. I sat between a girl who'd grown up with magic and a boy who, like me, was still in awe of it all. We talked about our families, what we were excited to learn, and which professor we were most scared of. By the end of the meal, it felt like I'd known them for years. After the feast, our prefects led us to our common room. The password was spoken to a portrait, which swung open to reveal a cozy, circular room filled with squashy armchairs and a crackling fireplace. It was decorated in our house colors, and it felt instantly welcoming. Our dormitories were up a spiral staircase, with 4-poster beds draped in thick curtains. My trunk was already at the foot of one. My first rivalry began that night. To a friendly one, over who could snag the bed with the best view of the lake. The next morning was an absolute whirlwind of chaos and excitement. Getting to the great hall for breakfast felt like a wild adventure all on its own. Can you believe it? The staircases were actually moving. 1 minute, you're heading down, and the next, the whole flight swings you into a totally different corridor. It's like a funhouse. As we hurried along, I swear I heard the portraits whispering juicy gossip about the latest happenings. Just then, out of nowhere, Peeves, the poltergeist, zoomed by, tossing water balloons like it was a game. A prefect had to swoop in and pull me and a couple of friends away from a corridor on the 3rd floor, warning us it was strictly off limits. I made a mental note of that little tidbit. And don't even get me started on the forbidden forest outside. It's definitely living up to its mysterious reputation. I mean, who wouldn't feel a shiver just thinking about what's lurking in those shadows? Then came the classes. The moment I had imagined 1,000 times but could never have truly prepared for. Our first lesson was charms with Professor Flitwick, a tiny, excitable wizard whose head barely cleared the edge of his desk without the aid of a precarious stack of books. The classroom itself felt alive with possibility, sunlight streaming through tall, arched windows and dust motes swirling lazily in the air, as if even the particles themselves were waiting to be enchanted. Desks were lined with neatly placed feathers, our first tools in what would become a lifelong study of magic. The spell was simple in theory, but felt so daunting in practice. Wingardium Leviosa. My heart was racing as I lifted my wand, and it felt like I was holding the weight of centuries of wizarding tradition in my hand. My first attempt, let's just say it sent a weak ripple of air across the table, and that poor feather gave this sad little wobble before just settling flat again, totally mocking my effort. Around me, I could see sparks flying and gusts of wind going haywire, showing I wasn't alone in this struggle. It was kind of comforting, you know. Everyone was just as nervous, and I could hear some quiet chuckles from my classmates. It made me realize that mastering magic takes practice, and hey, maybe we all just need a little more patience and a few more tries to get it right. But when the girl from dinner beside me moved with deliberate precision, her feather rose gracefully into the air, twirling as if dancing to music only it could hear. A hush fell over the room, and for a heartbeat, I forgot to breathe. In that instant, the classroom wasn't just a room, It was a place where the impossible bent and shifted under our fingertips. The thrill that swept through me was unlike anything I had felt before. We weren't dreaming. We were actually doing magic. Potions, however, was a different story. The dungeons were cold, and Professor Snape swept in like a storm cloud. His voice was a low drawl that cut through any whispers of excitement. He didn't care for foolish wand-waving and made it clear that one mistake could lead to disaster. I was terrified of melting my cauldron, but as I carefully chopped my ingredients and stirred my potion, watching it turn the perfect shade of blue, a different kind of magic took hold. The quiet thrill of creation, of getting something just right. That first day was a whirlwind of wonder, fear, and friendship. As I lay in my four-poster bed that night, the castle groaning softly around me, I looked out the window at the giant squid, waving a tentacle from the lake. I was exhausted, but so incredibly happy. I was lost in a castle of shifting stairs and talking portraits. I had a professor who seemed to hate me, and my magical abilities were, well, a work in progress. But I had friends. I had a house. I was at Hogwarts. I was finally home. Thanks so much for coming along on this magical memory with me. If you loved this little trip to Hogwarts, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more adventures. Let me know in the comments which house you'd be in. See you next time. The days after my first whirlwind day at Hogwarts passed in a blur of wonder, confusion, and the occasional near disaster. The castle itself seemed determined to make every simple task an adventure or a trap. What should have been an easy walk from the common room to the great hall often turned into an accidental detour through dusty, forgotten corridors or a sudden dead-end courtesy of a staircase that decided to swing in a completely different direction halfway up. Honestly, I muttered one morning, gripping the banister as the stairs began to lurch sideways beneath us. I'm starting to think these things are alive. They probably are, said Lily, the girl I'd sat next to at the feast. She was laughing as we stumbled into a new hallway we'd never seen before. Hogwarts likes to keep students on their toes. Or off them. By the end of the week, I had learned to leave 10 minutes early for every class. 15 if Peeves was lurking about. The poltergeist seemed to have taken a personal interest in us first years, ambushing us with chalk dust bombs, rearranging classroom signs, and once, memorably, replacing my quill with a live mouse. Breakfast in the Great Hall quickly became my absolute favorite time of day. Seriously, you guys, the whole place just glowed with this magical golden light as the sun peeked through. The enchanted ceiling mirrored the sunrise perfectly, making it feel like we were dining under a real sky. And those owls, they swooped in gracefully, dropping letters and packages right onto our tables, which felt like something out of a dream. I loved sitting there, sipping my pumpkin juice, watching the older students flipping through the Daily Prophet. It was like they were on a secret mission to uncover the wizarding world's hidden gems. Every morning felt like a new adventure waiting to unfold, and I couldn't get enough of it. Classes grew more challenging and more fascinating with each passing day. Transfiguration left my head spinning. Professor McGonagall turned a desk into a pig with a single flick of her wand, then coolly turned it back again. My own attempt at turning a matchstick into a needle ended with a vaguely metallic splinter and a very unimpressed look from her over the rim of her glasses. Her parting words, "Transfiguration is some of the most complex and dangerous magic you will learn at Hogwarts. Do not expect to master it overnight," were both discouraging and motivating. I vowed I would get it right before the term was over. It wasn't all academic struggle, though. Friendships were forming, sometimes in the most unexpected ways. Lily, for example, had a knack for charms and endless patience. often whispering tips under her breath when she noticed me fumbling with a spell. Finn, the boy who'd sat on my other side at the feast, proved to be a walking encyclopedia of magical creatures, and our late-night common room conversations often drifted to tales of dragons, hippogriffs, and something called a nundu that apparently required an entire team of wizards to subdue. But not everyone was so friendly. There was Marcus, tall, sharp-featured, and perpetually smirking. He had a way of making me feel like I didn't quite belong. Our rivalry began in charms when my feather finally lifted into the air a full week after everyone else's. Before I could even celebrate, Marcus leaned back in his chair and muttered just loud enough for me to hear, "About time." I told myself I didn't care, but the truth was, his words stung. And as much as I hated to admit it, they also motivated me. If Marcus wanted to look down on me, I was determined to give him a reason to look up instead. The highlight, or maybe the most terrifying moment of the week, came during our first flying lesson. The brooms were old and splintered, lined up neatly on the grass outside the castle. Madam Hooch, our instructor, barked instructions with the brisk efficiency of someone who had no patience for hesitation. "Stick out your right hand and say, 'Up, up,'" we all shouted. Some brooms leaped eagerly into waiting hands. Others rolled lazily on the ground. Mine smacked into my palm with enough force to leave a sting. The real challenge came when we actually took off. The wind roared in my ears, my stomach flipped, and for a terrifying moment I thought I might plummet to my doom. But then, balance. The broom responded to the slightest shift of my weight, and I soared higher. Below me, the castle sprawled like something out of a painting. And for the first time all week, I felt weightless in more ways than one. The lesson ended with a warning from Madam Hooch about reckless flying, delivered directly to Marcus, after he'd shown off with a dangerous dive that nearly ended in disaster. I couldn't help but smirk as he trudged back to the castle with a scolding ringing in his ears. Evenings at Hogwarts were usually pretty chill. You know, just picture it. Tables covered in parchment, the soft scratch of quills, and the cozy glow of the common room fires flickering in the background. But Hogwarts had this amazing knack for turning the ordinary into something magical. One night, while I was strolling back from the library with Lily and Finn, we suddenly heard these mysterious footsteps echoing down an empty hallway. It felt like something out of a story, right? Our hearts raced, and we exchanged curious glances, wondering if we were about to stumble upon a secret adventure. What could it be? A ghost? A hidden room? The thrill of the unknown made the air electric. No one was there. Then a door, one we'd never noticed before, slammed shut with a sound that reverberated down the corridor. We exchanged wide-eyed looks. "Third floor," Finn whispered. "We're not supposed to be here." We left quickly, but I glanced back once more. For just a moment, I could have sworn I heard something, not footsteps this time, but a low, rhythmic thud, like the heartbeat of something very large on the other side of that door. That night, as I snuggled into my cozy four-poster bed, I couldn't help but replay everything I'd experienced that week. Those moving staircases, pure magic, and the flying broomscan you imagine soaring through the air like that. Then there were those mysterious locked doors, almost whispering secrets, just waiting to be discovered. Hogwarts wasn't just a school. It felt like a living, breathing entity, bursting with magic, mystery, and endless possibilities. I was just scratching the surface of what this enchanting place had to offer, and my heart raced at the thought of all the adventures yet to come. And somewhere deep within its ancient stone walls, something was waiting. Something that I had a feeling would change everything. That thought clung to me long after the common room fire had burned down to embers, and my doormate's breathing had settled into the slow rhythm of sleep. I stared up at the canopy of my four-poster, tracing the carved patterns in the wood above with my eyes, unable to quiet the questions swirling in my mind. What was behind that door? Why had we heard footsteps when no one was there? And why, in a castle bursting with centuries of history and magic, did that one corridor feel so alive? It wasn't just curiosity, though, that burned bright enough to keep me wide awake. It was something deeper, like a string tugging at the edges of my thoughts, pulling me toward a truth I wasn't ready to see. Even as I drifted into a restless half-sleep, the echo of that distant, rhythmic thud seemed to pulse through the stone around me, as if the castle itself had a heartbeat I was only just beginning to hear. The days that followed only made that feeling stronger. Every corridor seemed to whisper secrets. Every portrait's sidelong glance hinted at things left unsaid. Once, while hurrying to potions, I could have sworn I saw a door vanish entirely from a wall as I approached. Smooth stone where, moments earlier, there had been an arched oak frame. Another time, in the library, I stumbled upon a dusty, long-forgotten atlas of Hogwarts grounds, its pages filled with winding tunnels and rooms that didn't seem to exist anymore. One passage, labeled only with an ink blot and a single ominous word, "Forbidden," was circled so many times the parchment had worn thin. I traced the circle with my finger, heart hammering, and wondered if the mapmaker had known about the corridor we'd found. If they, too, had felt the pull of something hidden. But Hogwarts had its own way of swallowing mysteries beneath the rush of daily life. Homework began piling up essays on wand movements for charms, diagrams of potion ingredients to memorize, a particularly unforgiving quiz on the 12 uses of dragon's blood that left half the class groaning in despair. Even so, every assignment felt more thrilling than anything I'd ever done in my old life. In between scribbling notes and racing between classrooms, I found myself stealing glances at the third-floor staircase whenever we passed it, my feet itching to turn left instead of right, my curiosity growing heavier with each day. Finn noticed it too. "You're obsessed," he teased one evening in the common room, tossing a Bertie Bott's every flavour bean into his mouth and making a face when it turned out to be sardine. "It's probably just a storage room or something." "Then why's it off limits?" I shot back. "And why does it thump?" "Maybe it's Peeves drumming," Lily offered from across the table, though her eyes betrayed the same spark of intrigue that had been gnawing at me. "Or maybe the professors are keeping some top-secret magical experiment locked away. Or something dangerous," Finn added, with a dramatic shiver that made us all laugh. But the truth was, none of us found that idea particularly fitted. If there was one thing we'd learned about Hogwarts in our short time there, it was that danger and wonder often shared the same corridor. Our evenings grew more adventurous after that conversation. At first, it was little things, detours down unfamiliar hallways, lingering near locked doors under the pretense of getting lost. But, as the week stretched on, our curiosity became bolder. We learned the castle's rhythms when Filch made his nightly rounds, which staircases were most likely to shift after curfew, and how to silence our footsteps with a simple charm Lily had read about. We never got close to the third-floor door again. Not yet, but we found other peculiarities that made the castle feel like a living puzzle. There was a suit of armor that bowed politely whenever you passed, a painting that refused to let anyone through unless they answered a riddle in rhyme, and a stone gargoyle that muttered warnings in Latin before falling silent again. Each discovery fed the fire inside me, the certainty that Hogwarts was more than a school. It was a labyrinth of secrets, waiting for the right hands to uncover them. Still, amid all the mystery and mischief, Hogwarts continued to weave its spell on us in quieter, subtler ways. Evenings by the fire turned into cherished rituals, pages of parchment spread across tables. The warm smell of toasted bread drifting from the kitchens, soft laughter echoing through the common room. Friendships that had begun as polite conversations now felt like something sturdier, forged in shared struggles and whispered secrets. Lily's laugh had become as familiar to me as my own, and Finn, despite his dramatic flair, had proven himself someone I could trust completely. Even Marcus, insufferable, smug Marcus, had his place in this new life, his constant competition pushing me to work harder, aim higher, prove myself worthy of the magic that now coursed through every part of my world. But every so often, late at night, when the castle had gone still and moonlight pooled like liquid silver on the common room floor, that sense of something waiting would rise in me again. It was there in the way the portraits would fall silent when I passed, in the way the floorboards creaked in empty corridors, in the way the forbidden forest seemed to lean closer to the castle with every passing day. Hogwarts was holding its breath, and I was certain, with a certainty that sent both excitement and fear thrumming through my veins, that sooner or later it would exhale, and whatever it was hiding would come rushing out. And when that happened, I knew my time here would no longer be about learning spells or passing exams. It would be about something far bigger. Something that might just change not only my life, but the fate of the entire wizarding world. It didn't take long before the novelty of Hogwarts, the floating candles, the moving staircases, even the portraits that liked to eavesdrop, became part of my daily rhythm. What had once felt like chaos now felt like home. I knew which staircase liked to twist toward the library on Tuesdays, and which one stubbornly refused to move before breakfast. I'd memorized the fastest route to Charms, and I even knew how to duck when Peeves came swooping down a corridor, cackling with a water balloon clutched in his spectral fist. And yet, even as life here began to feel familiar, there was still a pulse of something deeper running beneath the surface, a current that tugged at every conversation, every lesson, every moment in the great hall. It was house pride. I'd felt it on the night of the sorting, when my table roared in celebration as the hat shouted my name, but now, weeks later, I understood it more intimately. It wasn't just about wearing our colours or cheering for our own during Quidditch matches. It was about identity, about belonging to something bigger than yourself, about knowing that your triumphs were shared and your mistakes reflected on everyone sitting at that table. It was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. Our first official house meeting cemented that feeling. It took place late one evening in the common room, long after classes had ended and the castle had fallen into a sleepy hush. Our head of house, a tall, silver-haired witch with a piercing gaze that seemed to read every thought you weren't saying, stood before the crackling fire, her robes billowing slightly as though they had a life of their own. "This house," she said, her voice calm but commanding, "has stood for centuries on the principles of courage, resilience, and loyalty. These are not just words carved into our banners. They are a way of life. You will represent them in every spell you cast, every rule you follow, and yes, in every mistake you make. Hogwarts does not remember names, it remembers deeds." Her eyes swept across the room, and when they passed over me, I sat up a little straighter. It struck me then how much I wanted to be worthy of this place, not just for myself, but for the people sitting beside me. For Lily, whose wandwork was elegant and precise. For Finn, who still struggled with transfiguration but never stopped trying. Even for Marcus, who had a knack for reminding me of how far I had to go. We were all part of something now, and that something was bigger than any one of us. After the meeting, the common room hummed with energy. Students crowded around the fire, sharing stories of legendary victories, dueling championships, house cups, even pranks so ingenious that professors were rumored to have secretly applauded them. "We're going to win the cup this year," Lily whispered confidently as we sat by the window, watching snow begin to fall softly against the darkened glass. I can feel it. I wanted to believe her. Our house hadn't won the house cup in nearly a decade, according to one of the prefects, but this year felt different. There was a new hunger in the air, a sense that our generation might finally be the one to change that. The talk turned to rumors of a small inter-house competition being organized by the professors, a practical magic showcase designed to encourage teamwork and creativity. No points awarded, no official prize, just glory and bragging rights. But for us, that was more than enough. "Imagine," Finn said, his eyes gleaming, beating Slytherin at something before Christmas. Marcus would hate that. His grin was infectious, and I felt a surge of determination ignite in my chest. For the first time, it wasn't just about surviving classes or mastering spells. It was about proving ourselves. It was about showing everyone, including Marcus, that we belonged here as much as anyone. The next few days were charged with anticipation. Even in lessons, you could feel it, a subtle shift in the atmosphere, a collective sharpening of focus. Students practiced spells during lunch breaks, rehearsed incantations under their breath in corridors, and compared notes in the library until Madame Pants shooed them out. In charms, Professor Flitwick hinted that the competition might involve more than just spell work. Creativity will be just as important as precision, he chirped from atop his towering stack of books. After all, true magic lies not only in knowing the words, but in knowing how to use them. In potions, Snape said nothing about the competition directly, but the smirk that tugged at the corner of his mouth when he overheard two students whispering about it was enough to confirm he knew more than he was letting on. Even the ghosts seemed to buzz with gossip, passing through walls with cryptic remarks about old traditions being revived and tests of metal. By the time the announcement came, a notice pinned to the Great Hall's bulletin board, sealed with the Hogwarts crest, the tension was electric. The competition would take place at the end of the week, and every house would send a small team of first years to represent them. "This is it," Lily said, practically vibrating with excitement as we read the parchment together. "Our chance." I nodded, my heart thudding in agreement. It wasn't just a chance for glory or house pride, though those things mattered more than I wanted to admit. It was a chance to stand on equal footing with students who had grown up with magic their whole lives. A chance to prove to Marcus, to the professors, maybe even to myself, that I wasn't just some wide-eyed newcomer fumbling through spells. I belonged here, and I was ready to show it. The days leading up to the competition were some of the most intense I'd ever experienced. Every spare minute between classes became an opportunity to practice, revise, and push ourselves beyond what we thought we were capable of. The common room, once a place of cozy fireside chats and late-night snacks, transformed into something more like a training ground. Students huddled in groups, wands drawn, muttering incantations under their breath until sparks and swirls of light danced across the air. Lily, Finn, and I claimed a quiet corner near the portrait hole, practicing spells late into the night until our eyes stung and our fingers ached. The competition would test 3 areas: spellwork, potion brewing, and creativity. And though the professors refused to reveal the exact format, everyone was certain it would be nothing short of brutal. "They're not just testing skill," Lily said one night, slamming a book shut with a determined snap. "They're testing who we are under pressure." I wanted to laugh it off as an exaggeration, but deep down I knew she was right. Marcus, of course, was training too loudly and publicly, as if the entire castle needed to know just how ready he was. He strutted through the corridors with an air of smug confidence, always surrounded by a small cluster of admirers who laughed at his every joke and clapped when he executed a particularly difficult charm. Once, as we were leaving the library, he accidentally sent a levitating book swooping inches from my head. "Careful," he said with a smirk. "Wouldn't want you losing focus before the big day." I ignored him, though my jaw tightened as I walked past. I told myself that his arrogance didn't matter, that the only competition that truly mattered was with myself. But, if I was being honest, part of me wanted nothing more than to wipe that self-satisfied grin off his face in front of the entire school. It wasn't just rivalry anymore. It was personal. The morning of the competition arrived with a crispness in the air that made the castle feel newly alive. The great hall had been transformed. Long tables pushed aside, banners from each house draped dramatically from the rafters, and a raised platform at the center, lined with polished wood and glowing runes. Students packed the room, buzzing with excitement, while professors lined the edges like a council of judges. Professor McGonagall stood at the front, her expression as stern and unreadable as ever. "Today," she began, her voice carrying effortlessly over the crowd, "you will demonstrate not only your skill but your ingenuity. Remember, this is not about victory or defeat. It is about showing us who you are." Easy for her to say, I thought, as my heart pounded like a drum in my chest. For us, victory and defeat were everything. Our team, Lily, Finn, myself, and 2 other first years, stepped forward as our house was called. Across the platform, Marcus and his group stood waiting, his confident grin firmly in place. The first challenge was charms. A large wooden block hovered in mid-air, rotating slowly. Our task was to transform it into something that demonstrated creativity, precision, and control. Lily went first, tracing graceful arcs with her wand as she murmured a complex incantation. The block rippled, morphed, and reshaped itself into a gleaming phoenix mid-flight, its wooden wings spreading wide as if about to soar off the platform. The crowd gasped in appreciation. I stepped forward next, wand trembling slightly in my hand. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Transmuto forme," I whispered. The block shivered, then twisted into a towering oak tree, branches stretching outward, leaves delicately carved into the wood. It wasn't as spectacular as Lily's phoenix, but when the audience murmured in approval, pride swelled in my chest. Marcus followed with a flourish, transforming his block into a snarling dragon perched on a cliff. It roared loudly, sending a ripple of applause through the hall. I clenched my jaw. The competition was close. Next came the potion challenge, held in a smaller chamber beneath the hall, where rows of cauldrons bubbled ominously. The goal, brew a draught of clarity, a notoriously difficult potion that revealed hidden writing when poured over parchment. The room was filled with the sharp tones of crushed herbs and the earthy smell of simmering roots. I moved carefully, double-checking each measurement, mindful of Snape's earlier warning about potion-making being the difference between mastery and disaster. Finn nearly added the powdered moonstone too early, but we caught the mistake in time, working together to correct it. Across the room, Marcus worked alone, his movements quick and precise. When the judges tested our potion, the parchment glowed with crisp, readable script, not perfect, but good enough. Marcus's glowed brighter, sharper. Another narrow loss. The final test was the one no one had expected, and the one that would decide everything. "You will face a problem," Professor Flitwick explained, eyes twinkling mischievously. "How you solve it is entirely up to you." A large wooden maze appeared on the platform. filled with enchanted obstacles, shifting walls, magical traps, and strange puzzles etched into the floor. Our task was simple in theory: navigate the maze and retrieve a small crystal orb at the center. In practice, it was chaos. Spells ricocheted wildly as we worked together to clear obstacles, shouting instructions and warnings over the roar of conjured winds and bursts of fire. At one point, Finn nearly fell into a pit that opened beneath his feet, saved only by Lily's quick thinking and a perfectly timed levitation charm. Marcus's team moved with ruthless efficiency, blasting through barriers with brute magical force, but brute force could only get them so far. At the heart of the maze, a puzzled door blocked their way, one that required careful teamwork to open. That was where we excelled. Each of us contributed, Lily deciphering the runes, Finn solving the magical logic puzzle, and me casting the final unlocking charm. The door swung open, and together we seized the orb, just seconds before Marcus burst through a wall behind us. The crowd erupted as the judges conferred. The results were close, closer than anyone expected, but when McGonagall raised her wand for silence and announced that our house had claimed victory, the room exploded into cheers. Lily whooped and threw her arms around me. Finn shouted so loudly his voice cracked. Even the older students pounded the tables in approval. Across the room, Marcus stood stiffly, his smile gone, his jaw tight as he clapped slowly with forced politeness. I met his gaze for just a moment, and in that moment I knew this wasn't over. It wasn't the end of our rivalry. It was only the beginning. That night, as we celebrated by the fire with pumpkin pasties and cups of butterbeer, I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the flames. For the first time since stepping off the Hogwarts Express, I wasn't just a newcomer fumbling through spells. I was part of something bigger, a team, a house, a legacy. And as the cheers echoed around me and the banners swayed gently above, I couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, I was exactly where I was meant to be. The glow of victory lingered for days after the competition, warming every corner of the common room like the last rays of sunlight clinging to the sky before nightfall. Everywhere I went, people I barely knew clapped me on the back or called out congratulations. Even a few older students nodded approvingly as I passed in the corridors, and though their praise was brief and understated, it meant more than I could say. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't just at Hogwarts, I was part of it. Our success had become the talk of the school, whispered about in classrooms and over cauldrons, replayed again and again at lunch tables, as though each retelling made it more real. And yet, beneath all the celebration, something else was stirring, something quieter, colder, and harder to name. Because with victory came a strange new awareness. This place, with all its light and laughter, was built atop layers of shadow. And the deeper I looked, the more I sensed those shadows shifting. It started with overheard words, fragments of conversations that seemed to mean nothing on their own but hinted at something larger when pieced together. One evening, leaving the library later than usual, I paused as two professors passed just beyond the stacks. "It's moving again," one whispered, their tone clipped and anxious. "We'll need to reinforce the charms." "They won't get near it," the other replied quickly. "Not unless they're foolish enough to try." Their footsteps faded down the hall before I could hear more, but the words lodged themselves deep in my thoughts. It, never named, never explained, but always spoken of in the same low, careful tone, as though even saying too much might wake it from slumber. After that, I began noticing other things, small, almost insignificant details that I might have dismissed if not for the questions now gnawing at me. A door that was always locked, even when every other classroom on the floor stood open. a corridor that students whispered about but never walked down. Once, while helping Professor Flitwick tidy up after class, I glimpsed a thick, iron key tucked into a drawer, its surface etched with unfamiliar runes. When I asked what it was for, he quickly shut the drawer and changed the subject. And one night, on my way back from astronomy, I saw Professor McGonagall herself, standing before the entrance to the forbidden corridor, wand raised, lips moving silently as shimmering runes flared briefly against the door before fading away again. Whatever was behind it, they were guarding it, protecting it, hiding it. Even Marcus seemed to sense that something was off. Our rivalry had cooled slightly after the competition, the raw bitterness of his loss replaced by something sharper, more calculating. One afternoon in the library, I caught him staring at a stack of ancient spellbooks on magical wards and protective enchantments. When he noticed me watching, he snapped the book shut and offered a thin smile. "Curiosity's a dangerous thing," he said, his voice low and deliberate. "Especially here." It was meant as a warning, but it felt like a challenge, and I couldn't shake the suspicion that he knew more than he was letting on. Perhaps he, too, had heard the footsteps. Perhaps he, too, had felt the castle's secrets pressing against the walls. The whispers of danger only deepened when a rumor swept through the first-year common rooms one night. Someone claimed to have seen something moving in the shadows near the forbidden forest, something massive, low to the ground, and far too fast for any ordinary creature. Others dismissed it as nonsense, the result of too much butterbeer and not enough sleep. But I wasn't so sure. The thought of it, whatever it was, prowling the edges of the castle grounds, sent a shiver down my spine. Hogwarts had felt safe when I first arrived, its walls ancient and steadfast, its professors powerful and wise. But now, that safety felt like an illusion, a curtain drawn over something vast and unpredictable that lurked just out of sight. One evening, as autumn deepened and the first hints of frost crept into the air, Lily, Finn, and I found ourselves lingering in the common room long after everyone else had gone to bed. The fire burned low, casting long, flickering shadows across the room. "Do you think it's true?" Finn asked quietly, staring into the flames. "That there's something behind that door?" Lily glanced at me, her expression unreadable. "Of course there is," she said softly. "The question isn't if, it's what." The three of us fell silent after that, the crackle of the fire the only sound in the room. And in that silence, something shifted, not in the castle, but in us. Curiosity had become determination. The door wasn't just a mystery anymore. It was a question demanding an answer. Later that night, as I climbed the spiral staircase to my dormitory, I paused at the window and stared out across the grounds. The moon hung low over the forbidden forest, its pale light silvering the lake and casting long, jagged shadows across the trees. Somewhere out there, or perhaps just beneath my feet, lay the truth I couldn't stop thinking about. I pressed my hand against the cold glass and made myself a promise. One day, I would find out what was hidden behind that door. One day, I'd see for myself the thing Hogwarts was so desperate to keep locked away. And when that day came, I had no doubt that nothing, not professors, not rules, not even the walls of the castle itself, would ever be the same again. It began, as most dangerous ideas do, with a whisper, a single, reckless thought that refused to be silenced. By the time October's chill had crept into the castle and the days had shortened into dusky twilights, that whisper had grown louder, insistent, impossible to ignore. It echoed in my head during charms, hummed in the background of every conversation, and followed me through the labyrinthine halls like a second shadow. What was behind that door? The question had lived rent-free in my mind since the night we heard footsteps on the third floor. But now it felt less like curiosity and more like a summons. The castle itself seemed to be conspiring to pull me toward it, a flicker of movement at the end of a corridor, a door that stayed locked even when every other one opened, the occasional glimpse of a professor's robes disappearing around a forbidden corner. Whatever Hogwarts was hiding, it wasn't ordinary. And the more the adults tried to keep us away from it, the more determined I became to know why. The final push came on a quiet Thursday evening, the kind that settles like a held breath before a storm. The common room was nearly empty, the fire reduced to glowing embers, and the castle beyond was wrapped in silence. Lily was sprawled on the rug with a stack of arithmancy notes. Finn was reading yet another book about magical creatures, and I was staring at the same paragraph in Magical Theory for Beginners for the 6th time without absorbing a single word. The frustration boiled over before I even realized I was speaking. "We should go," I said suddenly. Lily looked up, frowning. "Go where?" I didn't answer right away, letting the weight of my words hang in the air. "The 3rd floor," I said finally. "We should see it for ourselves." Finn nearly dropped his book. "Are you mad? That corridor's forbidden for a reason." "Exactly," I replied, leaning forward. "And I want to know what that reason is." The silence that followed was long and heavy. Lily chewed her lip, her eyes flicking toward the window where the moonlight cast thin silver bars across the floor. "It's dangerous," she murmured. "We could get expelled." "We could," I admitted. "But aren't you tired of wondering?" That was the truth of it. I wasn't trying to be reckless. I was tired of not knowing, tired of being told there were secrets I wasn't allowed to learn. Hogwarts was supposed to be a place of discovery, of knowledge, and yet here we were, locked out of one of its greatest mysteries. We debated for over an hour. Finn listed every possible consequence: detention, expulsion, being turned into a toad by an angry professor. Lily weighed the risks with the precision of a chess player, pointing out every flaw in my plan and every hole in my logic. But underneath all the fear and hesitation, there was something else in their eyes too. The same spark of curiosity that had been keeping me awake at night. In the end, that spark won. "Fine," Lily sighed, closing her book with a decisive thud. "But we do this my way. We plan every step. No improvising." Finn groaned, but even he couldn't hide the excitement creeping into his voice. "If we're caught, I'm blaming both of you," he muttered, though we all knew he'd never miss it for the world. And just like that, the plan was set. We would wait until after curfew, when the castle was at its quietest. We'd use the disillusionment charm Lily had been practicing, clumsy but passable, and time our route around Filch's nightly patrol. If all went well, we'd reach the 3rd floor, peek behind that door, and be back in our dorms before anyone noticed we were gone. The hours leading up to midnight felt endless. Classes dragged, dinner was tasteless, and even the warm, comforting glow of the common room couldn't shake the tension coiling in my stomach. By the time the rest of the house had gone to bed and the common room lay silent and dark, I felt as though every second stretched into an eternity. Finally, when the clock above the mantelpiece chimed 12, Lily appeared at the top of the stairs, her wand already in hand. Finn followed, looking pale but resolute. "No turning back now," I whispered. "Brilliant," he muttered. "Exactly what I wanted to hear." We slipped out of the portrait hole and into the corridor beyond, our footsteps muffled by layers of charm and adrenaline. The castle at night was an entirely different creature. Gone were the chatter and clatter of daytime, the shifting staircases, the bustling corridors, the hum of laughter spilling from common rooms. In their place stretched long, silent hallways bathed in moonlight. shadows pooling in every corner, and the faint hum of ancient magic vibrating through the stones beneath our feet. Portraits dozed in their frames, their snores echoing softly against the high vaulted ceilings. A suit of armor creaked as we passed, its visor swiveling to follow us with a low, metallic groan. The air felt colder, too, as though the castle itself were holding its breath, watching, waiting. We moved carefully, every creak of the floorboards sounding deafening in the stillness. Twice we froze as Filcher's lantern bobbed in the distance, his grumbling voice drifting closer before fading away again. At one point, Mrs. Norris slinked past, her glowing eyes sweeping the corridor mere inches from where we pressed ourselves flat against the wall. My heart hammered so loudly I was sure she'd hear it, but she padded silently away, leaving us trembling in her wake. Finally, after what felt like hours but could only have been minutes, we reached the 3rd floor. The corridor stretched before us, long, dim, and utterly still. It looked no different from any other hallway in the castle. Rows of heavy wooden doors, torchlight flickering faintly along the walls, a tapestry depicting a medieval duel hanging crookedly near the end. And yet, standing there, I could feel the weight of something different in the air, a hum of power just beneath the surface, a thrum that seemed to sync with my heartbeat. "There it is," Lily whispered, pointing toward a single door at the far end of the corridor. Unlike the others, it bore no handle, no hinges, no markings of any kind, just smooth, ancient wood, sealed as if by magic itself. I took a step forward, and the air grew colder still, as though the castle were warning us back. For a moment, none of us spoke. We simply stared, our breaths shallow, our nerves stretched taut. And then, without meaning to, I whispered the question that had haunted me since the first night. "What's behind it?" No one answered. There was nothing to say. The only sound was the faint rustling of the torches and the distant creak of the castle settling in its sleep. And yet, in that silence, I felt something, a presence, vast and ancient, stirring just beyond the wood. It was as if the door itself were breathing, its heartbeat steady and slow, waiting for someone foolish enough to try and open it. And standing there, in that forbidden hallway, with the weight of centuries pressing down on us, I realized we were closer to that heartbeat than anyone had been in a very, very long time. We stood frozen in front of the door, hearts beating in unison. The silence between us waited with questions none of us dared to speak. I felt like I was standing on the edge of something vast, not a cliff or a chasm, but a revelation. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to go back to the warmth of the common room, to let this remain a mystery for someone else to solve. And yet, my feet refused to move. It was as if invisible threads were pulling me forward, binding me to this moment. Beside me, Lily's breath came shallow and uneven, her knuckles white around her wand. Finn's usual nervous chatter had vanished, replaced by a tense stillness. "We shouldn't be here," he whispered, the words quivering in the cold air. "We shouldn't be doing this." He was right. Of course he was right. But we had come too far to stop now. "Let's just look," I murmured, though I wasn't sure if I was trying to convince them or myself. Lily nodded once, sharply, and raised her wand. A faint blue glow bloomed from its tip, casting soft light over the door's ancient surface. Up close, it was even stranger, seamless and smooth, as though carved from a single piece of enchanted wood. No handle, no keyhole, no obvious point of entry. Just one small, almost imperceptible sigil etched near the bottom. A circular rune that pulsed faintly with a light of its own, as if responding to our presence. "That's old magic," Lily breathed, crouching to study it more closely. "Older than the castle, maybe." I've never seen anything like it." She reached out tentatively, but the moment her fingertips brushed the surface, a wave of cold rippled outward, making the torches along the walls flicker and sputter. Finn jerked back, stumbling into me. "Did you feel that?" he hissed. I had a pulse of power, subtle but immense, thrumming through the stone beneath our feet. Whatever was behind this door, it was alive. Then we heard it. At first, I thought it was just the castle shifting, an old building groaning and settling in its sleep. But then it came again, a deep, heavy thud from somewhere beyond the door, rhythmic and deliberate, like footsteps. My breath caught in my throat. Another thud, and another. Each one louder, closer, accompanied now by a faint scraping sound, as if something enormous was shifting its weight against the floor. "Tell me that's not footsteps," Finn whispered, his voice barely audible. "It's footsteps," Lily replied grimly, her eyes fixed on the door. The rune pulsed faster now, as if reacting to the movement beyond, and the air grew colder still. A low, guttural sound, something between a growl and a snore, rolled through the corridor, so deep I felt it in my chest more than I heard it. Then came the unmistakable clack of claws against stone. "Time to go," Finn breathed. "Now." We didn't argue. The three of us turned and ran, our footsteps echoing far too loudly against the floor as we bolted back down the corridor. Behind us, the sounds continued, a heavy shift, a deep rumble, the faintest scrape like something brushing against the inside of the door. I didn't dare look back. My heart pounded in my ears, drowning out everything but the frantic rush of blood and the desperate thud of our boots against the stone. Twice I nearly tripped over the hem of my robes. Once Finn stumbled, and I grabbed his arm to keep him upright. All the while I could feel it. The weight of something awake now, aware of us, pressing against the edges of that sealed room. We rounded a corner and skidded to a halt. A lantern bobbed toward us from the far end of the hall. Filch, of course, it was Filch. He was muttering to himself, Mrs. Norris padding silently beside him, her yellow eyes gleaming in the dark. "Oh no," Lily breathed. There was nowhere to hide, no tapestry, no alcove, no convenient door. Thinking fast, I yanked Finn and Lily toward a narrow archway where the corridor dipped into shadow. We pressed ourselves against the wall, holding our breath as Filch's lantern light crept closer. He shuffled past, grumbling about students sneaking about and detentions for a month. Mrs. Norris stopped and sniffed the air, her ears twitching. For one heart-stopping moment, her eyes met mine. I was sure we were done for. But then she turned away, and the two of them disappeared around the corner. We didn't stop moving after that. We crept, then walked, then ran again, winding our way through the silent castle until we burst back into our common room, breathless and trembling. For a long time, none of us spoke. The fire had gone out, and the room was bathed in silver moonlight, but I barely noticed. My heart was still racing. My hands were still shaking. And beneath all the fear, there was something else, something deeper. Or, whatever was behind that door wasn't just dangerous. It was ancient, powerful, alive. It wasn't some cursed artifact or forgotten classroom. It was something, and it knew we had been there. Later that night, lying awake in the darkness of the dormitory, I replayed the sounds over and over in my head. The heavy footsteps, the low rumble, the scrape of claws. Each detail carved itself deeper into my memory, refusing to fade. Part of me was terrified. Another part, a larger, more reckless part, burned with curiosity. We had come within inches of one of Hogwarts' deepest secrets, and though the experience had shaken me to my core, it had also left me hungry for more. What was that creature? Why was it there? And what could possibly be so important that the school had gone to such lengths to hide it? Sleep didn't come easily. When it finally did, it was filled with dreams of shadowy corridors, ancient runes, and something vast and unseen breathing in the darkness. And when I awoke the next morning, one thought was already waiting for me, clear and unshakable as the sunrise spilling through the window. We were closer than ever now. And no matter the risk, no matter the danger, I knew one thing with absolute certainty: we were going back. It's strange, looking back now, to think how terrified I was the day I first stepped onto platform 9 3/4. How small and uncertain I felt as the Hogwarts Express pulled away from the station, carrying me toward a world I could hardly imagine. I remember pressing my face to the glass and wondering if I was making a mistake, if I was meant for this life of spells and incantations, of broomsticks and cauldrons and enchanted ceilings. I wasn't born into it like so many others. Magic, for me, had always been something that existed in storybooks, in whispered myths and impossible dreams. And yet, here I am, wand in hand, quill scratching against parchment, writing by the soft glow of my dormitory lantern after weeks that feel like a lifetime. So much has changed since that day. I've learnt spells that bend the laws of nature, seen objects transform and levitate at the flick of a wrist. I've brewed potions that shimmer like liquid silver and mastered charms that make feathers dance through the air. But more than that, more than the lessons and the spells, Hogwarts has changed me. It's as if the castle itself is slowly reshaping who I am, polishing away the rough edges of doubt and hesitation, revealing something I never knew was inside me. Courage, perhaps, curiosity, a hunger for knowledge I didn't even realize I had. And beneath all of that, a sense of belonging, something I never expected to find in a place so far from everything I once called home. It hasn't all been easy. Of course, there have been failures, plenty of them. Spells that fizzled out in a puff of smoke, potions that turned the wrong color, staircases that led me hopelessly astray. There's still a professor who seems to despise me on sight, still a rival whose shadow I can't quite escape. There are days when I feel like I'm stumbling through every lesson, like the entire magical world is laughing quietly behind my back. But those moments no longer define me, because every failure teaches me something. Every mistake pulls me a little closer to understanding, and every setback makes the victories, even the small ones, feel all the more real. And then there are the things I can't stop thinking about. The whispers in the halls, the forbidden door, the heavy footsteps behind enchanted wood. There's a mystery buried deep within this castle, something ancient and powerful that hums just beneath the surface of everything. I've seen only glimpses of it, felt its breath in the dark, heard its heartbeat through stone, but even those brief encounters have changed the way I see this place. Hogwarts is not just a school. It's a living thing, full of secrets and stories, some of which were never meant for first years like me. And yet, the more I learn, the more certain I am that my path will cross those secrets again. Curiosity has become something heavier now, not just a desire to know, but a need. Because if there's one thing magic has taught me, it's that knowledge itself is power. And the only way to wield that power wisely is to understand it fully. I don't know what the rest of this year will bring. There are challenges ahead, I'm sure of it, lessons I haven't begun to imagine, dangers I'm not yet ready to face. But, for the first time, I feel ready to meet them. The boy who boarded the Hogwarts Express was uncertain, afraid, half convinced he didn't belong here. The person writing this now still has doubts, plenty of them, but he also has something else. He has friends who believe in him. He has a house that calls him one of its own. He has a purpose that grows clearer with every passing day. Most of all, he has a future, one written not in ink or prophecy, but in the choices he has yet to make. And though I don't know where those choices will lead me, I do know this. I'm not the same person who stared wide-eyed at the castle from a boat on the lake. I'm stronger now, bolder, hungrier for the truth. And whatever lies ahead, whether it's glory, danger, or something far stranger, I will meet it head-on, wand in hand, ready to carve my place into the story of this extraordinary world. By the time November rolled around, the crisp autumn air had turned sharper, carrying with it the smell of wood smoke from the castle's many hearths and the faint, sweet scent of caramel apples drifting from the great hall's kitchens. Hogwarts was shifting into its next season. Colder mornings, thicker cloaks, and corridors decorated with floating pumpkins and flickering lanterns. Even the ghosts seemed livelier, sweeping through the halls with a kind of theatrical mischief that only deepened the school's sense of wonder. It was the sort of magic that wrapped itself around you without warning, in the way enchanted leaves danced lazily in mid-air near the courtyards, or how the staircases creaked like old friends greeting you on a chilly morning. And though I had started to feel like I belonged here, there was still one class that never failed to make my stomach twist with nerves: potions. It wasn't the subject itself. I actually found it fascinating in a strange, meticulous way. There was something deeply satisfying about the precision it demanded, the exact number of clockwise stirs, the subtle timing between ingredients, the delicate balance between too much heat and too little. No, the problem wasn't the craft. The problem was Professor Snape. He was the one teacher who could turn a room full of bubbling cauldrons and glowing elixirs into a silent arena with a single look. And for reasons I still couldn't understand, his sharp gaze always seemed to linger on me a little longer than anyone else's, as if he were waiting for me to slip up, to prove I didn't belong in his classroom. That morning was no different. The dungeons were colder than usual, a damp chill seeping through the flagstones and coiling around our ankles as we filed in. The torches burned low, casting long, flickering shadows across rows of heavy wooden tables. The room smelled of something sharp and metallic, ground silverweed, perhaps, and the faint hiss of simmering cauldrons filled the air like a restless whisper. "Today," Snape announced, sweeping into the room with his usual billow of black robes, "we will be brewing a potion far beyond the paltry efforts you have made so far. The draught of focus." His voice was soft but carried effortlessly, slicing through the room like a blade. A simple enough concept, yet deceptively complex to craft. Brewed correctly, it sharpens the mind, quickens reflexes, and enhances magical control. Brewed incorrectly. He paused, letting the silence stretch. "Well, I suggest you don't find out." I exchanged a quick glance with Lily. She offered a small, encouraging smile, the kind that said, "We've got this," even if she wasn't entirely sure we did. Finn, on my other side, was already sweating. We set to work, measuring, slicing, and stirring, as Snape prowled the aisles like a shadow, his eyes darting from cauldron to cauldron. Every so often, he'd stop behind a student, mutter a biting critique, and move on. When he reached our table, I felt his presence before I even looked up, a chill, heavy silence that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. "Tell me," he drawled, peering into my cauldron, "did you plan to overheat the infusion, or is that just a happy accident?" My heart lurched. I glanced down. The potion was bubbling a little too vigorously. "No, sir. I was just about to fix it," he interrupted sharply, turning away with a sweep of his cloak. Before you reduce the class to a cloud of purple smoke, the room was thick with tension as the minutes crawled by. Students whispered hurriedly to one another, trading tips and warnings. The faint clink of glass vials and the soft swish of stirring rods echoing through the chamber. As the potion neared completion, the smell shifted, first to something earthy and metallic, then to a crisp, clean scent like rain on stone. I watched, mesmerized, as the liquid in my cauldron shifted from dull grey to a shimmering shade of silver blue. "Not bad," Lily murmured, leaning over to inspect it. "If it holds that color, you might actually survive this lesson." I laughed under my breath, the tension in my chest loosening slightly. Then came the testing. Snape moved from table to table, inspecting potions with a practiced eye, his expression revealing nothing. Most students received a curt nod or a dismissive hum. When he reached mine, he paused longer than usual, swirling a small sample in a glass vial. The silver-blue liquid clung to the sides like liquid light, glowing faintly in the dimness. For a moment, just a moment, I thought I saw something almost like approval flicker in his eyes. "Acceptable," he said finally, his voice devoid of praise but noticeably lacking in venom. Then, after a beat, "Barely. It shouldn't have meant anything." It was hardly a compliment, but to me, it felt like a small victory, a sliver of recognition from the one professor whose approval seemed perpetually out of reach. And yet, as we packed away our things and the class began to empty, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more behind his words. Something measured, deliberate. It was as if he'd seen something, not just in the potion, but in me, that I didn't fully understand yet. "Hey," Lily said as we climbed the dungeon steps back into the warm glow of the main castle, "you did really well today." Finn nodded, still clutching his notes like a lifeline. "I thought for sure Snape was going to explode your cauldron." I smiled faintly, but my mind was elsewhere. Snape's gaze had lingered on me again as I left, dark and unreadable. It wasn't the look of a teacher dismissing a mediocre student. It was something else, something almost like curiosity, and that was when I realized the lesson that day had been about more than just brewing a potion. It was about control, not just of ingredients or incantations, but of myself, of fear, of focus, of the magic that hummed just beneath my skin, waiting for me to understand it. And though I didn't yet know it, that was a lesson that would matter far beyond the walls of a cold dungeon classroom. The corridors outside the dungeon were alive with the usual midday bustle, portraits gossiping lazily as students hurried past, the faint clatter of moving staircases echoing above. But I barely noticed any of it. My thoughts were still tangled in that silver-blue potion, in the way Snape's eyes had lingered on me just a little too long. I might have let it go, chalked it up to nerves or imagination, if not for what happened next. "Stay behind," his voice had said as the rest of the class began to shuffle out. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise with the weight of a command. My heart thudded. Students glanced over their shoulders as they filed out, exchanging curious looks, but no one dared linger. Within moments, the dungeon was empty, except for Snape and me. The door closed behind the last student with a soft click, and the silence that followed was heavy enough to press against my chest. For a long moment, Snape didn't speak. He stood by his desk, hands folded behind his back, staring into the empty cauldron where the faintest shimmer of potion residue still clung to the sides. Then, without looking up, he said, "Do you know why I teach potions?" I blinked. It was not a question I'd expected, and certainly not one I'd ever imagined he'd ask. I suppose because you're good at it," I offered, my voice uncertain. The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but not far from one either. "Good at it," he repeated softly. Such a simplistic answer. He turned then, his eyes locking on to mine with a weight that made me feel like he was looking straight through me. "I teach potions," he continued, "because it is the one branch of magic that reminds students that power is not just about force. Most of you walk into this castle dreaming of grand displays, spells that explode, charms that dazzle, duels that leave your opponents trembling. But true power? He paused, stepping closer, the shadows of the dungeon curling around him like a cloak. True power is quiet. It is patience. It is precision. It is knowing when to act and when not to. I swallowed hard, unsure whether to speak. He began to pace slowly, his robes whispering across the flagstones. A potion does not care how talented you are. It does not yield to arrogance or bravado. It demands respect. It punishes recklessness. And if you approach it without focus, without humility, it will betray you. He stopped directly in front of me. Magic is no different. The room felt colder somehow, the air heavier, sure. His voice dropped to a near whisper, but every word landed like a spell. I have seen wizards who were brilliant beyond measure, dueling champions. Spellcrafters, scholars, fall because they thought their raw power was enough. They believed strength alone made them invincible. And they were wrong. Power without discipline is chaos. Magic without restraint is destruction. His gaze sharpened, pinning me where I stood. Remember that? Remember it before you let your ambition outrun your understanding. I wanted to ask him why he was telling me all this. Why me, and not Lily, or Marcus, or anyone else? But before I could speak, he continued. I've watched you, you know, he said, his tone softer now, though no less intense. You are curious, perhaps dangerously so. And curiosity, while useful, is a blade with two edges. Handle it without care, and it will cut deeper than you intend. My chest tightened. Did he know? Had he somehow learned about the third-floor corridor, about what we'd seen, or rather heard, behind that sealed door? I tried to keep my face neutral, but I was certain he could see the flicker of guilt behind my eyes. At last, he stepped back, the weight of his words settling like dust in the silence between us. You may go, he said, simply. But just as I reached the door, he spoke again, quieter this time, almost to himself, yet clear enough for me to hear. Power is a choice, and once you've chosen to wield it, you don't get to set it down again. Remember that, too. I left the dungeon, feeling as though something inside me had shifted. It wasn't fear, exactly, though Snape's warning echoed in my chest like the lingering toll of a bell. It was something deeper, heavier, a realization that magic, the thing I had once dreamed of as pure wonder, was also a responsibility. It wasn't enough to simply learn it, to wield it like a toy or a tool. It had to be understood, respected, mastered. And if I wasn't careful, it could become something far more dangerous than I ever imagined. That night, long after the torches had dimmed and the castle had gone to sleep, I lay awake, staring at the canopy of my bed, Snape's words looping endlessly through my thoughts. Power without discipline is chaos. Magic without restraint is destruction. It was the kind of lesson that didn't belong in a textbook, the kind that would linger long after the potion fumes faded and the cauldrons cooled. And though I didn't know it then, it was also the kind of lesson that would follow me for the rest of my life. Winter arrived at Hogwarts, not with a storm, but with a slow, steady transformation. The once bright lawns faded beneath a quilt of frost, the lake froze over in a sheen of glass, and the towering beech trees by the greenhouses shed the last of their autumn leaves. Even the air felt different, thinner, sharper, laced with the scent of snow and smoke. Inside the castle, roaring fireplaces became gathering places, and the corridors glowed with warm light that spilled from enchanted lanterns and floating wreaths of holly. Students huddled in scarves and thick robes, laughing over mugs of steaming cocoa and enchanted snowballs that never melted. Hogwarts in winter was beautiful, breathtaking, even, but beneath its postcard charm, something else had begun to settle over the castle. Something colder than the frost and heavier than the snow, a hum of anticipation. It was subtle at first, a chill draft where there shouldn't have been one, a whisper at the edge of hearing, gone the moment you tried to listen. A flicker of movement down an empty corridor. Most students brushed it off, just the castle being its usual self, they'd say with a shrug. But I noticed, I felt it. Ever since that night outside the forbidden door, I'd been more attuned to Hogwarts' heartbeat, the way it sighed and shifted, the way its very stones seemed to hold secrets. And lately, that heartbeat had changed. It was faster, louder, as if something deep within its walls had begun to stir. Even my dreams were different now. They used to be filled with ordinary things, broomsticks and charms, feasts and friendly rivalries. But now, when I closed my eyes, I saw shadowed corridors and glowing runes, keys turning in ancient locks, and always, that rhythmic thud behind the sealed door. Some nights I woke with my wand already in hand, breath ragged, as if I'd been running. And though I never told Lily or Finn about the dreams, I could tell I wasn't the only one feeling the change. They had started glancing over their shoulders in empty hallways. Lily jumped at sudden noises she would have once ignored. And Finn, usually the first to laugh off anything strange, had begun spending hours buried in the restricted section, poring over books on magical wards and ancient containment spells. One evening, about 2 weeks into the winter term, the three of us sat together by the common room fire, parchment and books spread out across the table. Outside, snow was falling thick and silent, coating the windows in a soft, white glow. "You've been quieter lately," Lily said suddenly, not looking up from the essay she was half-heartedly annotating. "More distracted." I hesitated before answering. "Haven't you felt it? Like the castles? Changing?" She paused, her quill mid-sentence. "Changing how?" "I don't know," I admitted. "It's like the magic is stronger, or closer. Like whatever's behind that door is awake now, and waiting." Finn shuddered and slammed his book shut. "Could we not talk about the door for once?" he muttered. "I'm trying to sleep through the night without imagining claws scraping against stone." We all laughed, but the sound was hollow, the kind of laughter that hides something else beneath it. The truth was, we were all thinking the same thing. We were all wondering if we had gone too far that night, if, by standing before that door, we had done more than satisfy our curiosity, if we had, somehow, woken something up. The professors seemed tense too. Flitwick, usually all smiles and enthusiasm, snapped at a student for mispronouncing a spell. McGonagall doubled the number of prefect patrols. And Snape, who was always intimidating but rarely rattled, had started carrying a small rune-etched vial on his belt that none of us had ever seen before. Even Hagrid, whose cheerful optimism could brighten the darkest day, avoided certain questions and changed the subject whenever the Forbidden Forest came up. Something was happening, something big, and though no one would say it outright, everyone could feel it. It was on one of those restless December nights, when the castle was quieter than usual and the wind howled against the high towers, that I heard it for the first time. The whispering. I had been unable to sleep, my mind chasing itself in endless circles. So I slipped out of bed and padded down to the common room for some air. The fire had burned low, throwing strange, twisting shadows across the walls. And then, from somewhere deep within the stone, I heard it faint and fragmented, like a voice carried on a distant breeze. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable, low, deliberate, and old. It wasn't the castle settling, or the wind in the walls. It was language, and it was coming from below. I froze, every instinct telling me to turn back, to forget I'd heard anything at all. But curiosity, that same stubborn, dangerous curiosity Snape had warned me about, rooted me to the spot. I strained to listen. The whispering ebbed and flowed, rising in places like a chant, then falling into silence again. It sounded ancient, like words spoken before the invention of wands, before Hogwarts itself had risen from the earth. And though I couldn't understand a single syllable, a single, chilling thought pressed itself into my mind. It knows we're here. I didn't sleep at all that night. And by morning, one thing was certain. Whatever was happening inside this castle was no longer something we could ignore. After that night, I couldn't unhear it. The whispers became a part of my world, slipping into the quiet moments when the castle was still, during late-night study sessions in the library, on solitary walks to breakfast before dawn, even in the gaps between breaths as I drifted toward sleep. At first, I thought they were my imagination, a side effect of too little rest and too many unanswered questions. But when I finally confessed what I'd heard to Lily and Finn, their reactions told me otherwise. Lily's eyes widened, and she admitted she'd heard something too, a strange humming sound beneath the floorboards near the Transfiguration corridor 2 nights prior. Finn tried to brush it off with a nervous laugh, but he'd seen something as well, faint runes pulsing along the base of a wall in the dungeons, glowing for a moment before vanishing when he blinked. It wasn't just us. Rumors began to ripple through the student body, growing louder with each passing day. A Slytherin prefect swore she'd seen one of the suits of armor move without anyone nearby. A pair of second years claimed they'd heard snarling behind the door to an unused classroom, snarling that stopped the instant they spoke. And a group of Hufflepuffs swore that their cauldron exploded during potions, not because of a mistake, but because the potion itself rejected the magic they were using. Most dismissed these stories as nonsense, the product of overactive imaginations or the castle's usual eccentricities. But for those of us who knew better, they were confirmation. Whatever was sleeping beneath Hogwarts stones was stirring. The professors offered no explanations, though their behavior spoke volumes. Patrols doubled again. The third-floor corridor was now guarded day and night, and protective enchantments shimmered faintly over the door if you looked closely enough. Professor Sprout cancelled a herbology field lesson for safety reasons, and Flitwick abruptly stopped a dueling demonstration halfway through when a spell rebounded off the air itself, as if striking an invisible wall. Even Dumbledore, who was rarely seen outside the Great Hall, appeared more frequently in the corridors, his expression thoughtful and distant, as if he were listening to something none of us could hear. Whatever they knew, they weren't telling us. And that silence only made the tension worse. For me, the whispers became more than a curiosity. They became an obsession. I started mapping where I heard them. Faint in the library's restricted section, louder near the third-floor corridor, and strongest of all in the dungeons, where the air always felt just a little too cold. Patterns began to emerge, a pulse, almost like the heartbeat of something buried deep beneath the school. "You're losing sleep over this," Lily scolded one afternoon as we sat hunched over a table in the library. "This isn't healthy." She was right. The dark circles under my eyes told their own story, but I couldn't stop. "It's building to something," I said, tracing lines across the parchment map I'd started keeping. "It's like the castle's talking to us, like it's trying to tell us something." Finn groaned and dropped his quill. "Or maybe it's trying to warn us. Ever think of that?" It was a fair point, and one I couldn't shake. Because, alongside the whispers, strange signs had begun appearing. Once, walking past a deserted corridor, I saw a trail of deep claw marks gouged into the stone floor, too large for any magical creature I knew of, and too fresh to be old damage. Another time, I found a single feather, massive and iridescent, wedged into the hinge of a door that had been sealed for decades. And one morning, long before dawn, I looked out over the frozen lake and saw ripples breaking across the ice, as if something beneath had brushed the surface before sinking back into the depths. Each clue was small and meaningless on its own, but together they painted a picture I wasn't ready to face. Whatever lay hidden behind that door was not staying still. Then, one evening, something happened that changed everything. It was late, too late, and the castle was quiet as I walked back from the library alone. My footsteps echoed faintly down the empty corridor, the torchlight flickering in long, uneven shadows. And then, without warning, the whispers returned, not faint this time, not distant, but loud, swelling around me like a chorus. They weren't just words now, either. They were urgent, insistent, rising and falling in a language that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I froze. My wand was in my hand before I even realized I'd drawn it. The air felt charged, humming with unseen power, and then I heard it, a sound that turned my blood to ice. Thud, thud, thud. It was the same sound I'd heard behind the door that night, heavy, deliberate footsteps. But this time, they weren't distant. They were moving, closer, louder. I spun around, wand raised, heart hammering against my ribs. The corridor was empty, the shadows were still. But the footsteps continued, growing sharper, faster, until they were just around the corner. And then, silence. I don't remember how I got back to the common room. I only remember bursting through the portrait hole, breathless and shaking, and finding Lily and Finn still awake, working on a transfiguration project. They took one look at my face and knew. "It's moving," I whispered, barely able to form the words. "Whatever's behind that door, it's not just awake. It's moving." The fire crackled quietly in the silence that followed, the flames casting long, quivering shadows across the room. None of us spoke for a long time. What was there to say? The mystery that had once felt distant, like an unsolved puzzle buried deep beneath centuries of magic, was now pressing against the very walls of the school. And as I sat there, staring into the flames, one truth settled cold and certain in my chest. Hogwarts was changing. The whispers weren't warnings. They were calls. And sooner or later, ready or not, we were going to have to answer them. By January, Hogwarts was colder than I'd ever seen it. Snow crusted the window ledges in thick white drifts. Icicles hung like jagged daggers from the towers, and the black lake lay frozen solid, reflecting the pale winter moon like a sheet of glass. The fireplaces roared day and night, and enchanted tapestries tried and often failed to keep the drafts at bay. Students moved briskly through the corridors, wrapped in scarves and cloaks, and even the ghosts seemed slower, their pale forms wreathed in faint mist. But beneath all that, beneath the frost and the laughter and the steaming mugs of butterbeer in the great hall, the tension was rising. Everyone could feel it now, that invisible hum in the castle's bones, that subtle wrongness threading through the air. Whispers of strange happenings darted from table to table during meals, and professors were caught speaking in hushed, urgent tones. It was no longer a question of if something was happening beneath Hogwarts. It was a matter of when it would break through. The first real crack came during charms. It started like any other lesson. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, glinting off rows of polished wands and stacks of enchanted textbooks. Professor Flitwick was particularly chipper that morning, darting about with his usual enthusiasm as he prepared us for a more advanced levitation charm. Control, precision, intent, he reminded us, hopping atop his stack of books to reach the blackboard. Magic is more than power, it's purpose. But then, it happened. Lily was halfway through her incantation when her feather meant to hover gently in midair suddenly shot upward with explosive force, embedding itself into the stone ceiling with a sharp crack. At the same moment, Finn's wand emitted a blinding burst of sparks that scorched the edge of his desk, and my own spell, which should have been steady and contained, pulsed outward like a shockwave, sending nearby parchments scattering. Flitwick's voice cut through the chaos. "Stop. Everyone stop." But the magic wasn't stopping. Around the room, charms were misfiring, wands vibrating with unstable energy, even the air itself shimmering as if struggling to contain something immense and volatile. It was over as quickly as it began. A heartbeat later, the room was still again. Students panting, desks overturned, one unfortunate feather smouldering in the corner. Flitwick's hands trembled slightly as he waved them for silence. "That was not your fault," he said quietly, "I believe. The castle is experiencing some magical fluctuations. You are dismissed for the day." It was the first time a professor had admitted anything was wrong. And once that first crack appeared, the others followed fast. A staircase collapsed under its own weight. A week later, no one was hurt, but 3 students had to be pulled from the rubble by Madame Pomfrey. A section of enchanted armor in the west wing animated on its own, and refused to stop attacking a tapestry until McGonagall blasted it to pieces. Doors that had remained sealed for centuries suddenly opened on their own, and everywhere, in corners and shadows, the whispers grew louder, no longer soft and fragmented, but rhythmic, pulsing, alive. "Something's coming," Lily said one evening as we huddled near the fire, the 3 of us watching the snow fall silently beyond the frosted glass. "And I don't think anyone's ready." Finn had stopped trying to make jokes. "We need to tell someone," he said. "Dumbledore, McGonagall, anyone. We're in way over our heads." But deep down, we all knew the truth. The professors already knew. They'd known for weeks, maybe longer. And if they couldn't stop it, what chance did we have? It was a Thursday night when the breaking point truly came. We were returning from the library after hours, something we weren't supposed to be doing. But by now, rules seemed quaint compared to the growing storm. The corridors were eerily silent, our footsteps echoing off the cold stone. Then, without warning, the ground beneath us shuddered. A deep, rumbling vibration rolled through the castle walls, strong enough to rattle portraits and send a few candles flickering out. Dust rained from the ceiling. "Did you feel that?" Finn whispered, his voice thin with fear. I didn't answer, because I could hear it. Then, the whispers were back, louder than ever, reverberating through the corridor in 1,000 overlapping voices, and beneath them, beneath the chanting and the murmur, came a sound that turned my blood to ice. Boom! The floor beneath our feet shook again, harder this time. Another boom, closer now, like something massive slamming against stone from below. And then, with a deafening crack, a section of the floor just ahead of us buckled and split, chunks of marble crashing into darkness below. A rush of cold, foul air swept up from the breach, carrying with it a smell that was ancient and metallic, like rust and rain, and something far, far older than either. We staggered back, wands raised, as the whispers crescendoed into a single, piercing word. One I didn't understand, but which every part of me recognized as a summons. And then the castle fell silent. The fissure remained a jagged wound in the corridor floor, but whatever had been hammering beneath the stone was still once more. The air was heavy with the residue of magic, the torches flickering weakly as if recovering from the shock. I glanced at Lily and Finn. Their faces were pale and wide-eyed, mirroring my own terror. "Whatever's down there," I whispered, my voice trembling. "It's not just trying to get out anymore. Lily swallowed hard. Then it means to break through. We stood there for a long time, staring into the darkness yawning below the broken floor, that unknown, forbidden space where something ancient stirred. And though none of us said it aloud, we all understood the truth. Hogwarts was no longer just our school. It was becoming a battlefield. The hole in the corridor floor was sealed by mourning, at least visibly. Heavy slabs of stone had been conjured over the breach, reinforced with layers of protective enchantments that pulsed faintly when you looked too closely. Professors patrolled the area in pairs, their voices clipped and nervous, and students were forbidden from setting foot anywhere near that part of the castle. But it didn't matter. We knew what lay beneath it, and we knew that if the castle was to survive whatever was clawing its way toward the surface, someone had to find out what it was before it broke through completely. That someone, as it turned out, was us. The plan came together in whispers and scribbled notes passed under tables, always careful, always cautious. Lily, of course, was the brains calculating guard rotations, memorizing patrol routes, even slipping into the restricted section to find anything that might hint at what was sealed below. Finn handled the practicalities, gathering supplies, brewing a mild invisibility draft from stolen potion ingredients, and securing a spare wand, just in case one of ours was lost. And me, I was the one who pushed it forward. Because, no matter how dangerous it was, no matter how foolish, I couldn't ignore that whispering, that feeling that something beneath Hogwarts was calling to us. And worse, that it might be calling me. We waited until a night when the castle was asleep and the snow fell thick and heavy outside, muffling sound and shrouding the grounds in silence. Midnight came and went, and when the common room had grown quiet and the last embers of the fire had burned low, we moved. Cloaks wrapped tight, wands tucked into our sleeves. We slipped through the portrait hole and into the shadowed corridor beyond. The castle was a different world at night. Gone were the crowds and chatter, replaced by an eerie stillness broken only by the occasional creak of ancient wood or the soft swish of a ghost drifting by. Moonlight spilled through high windows in pale silver ribbons, painting the stone floors with shifting patterns. Even the portraits were asleep, their inhabitants slumped in their frames or vanished entirely. It was beautiful and terrifying. Every sound felt too loud, every step too heavy. And beneath it all, I could feel the heartbeat of the castle again, that low, rhythmic pulse, stronger now, more insistent. It was waiting. We reached the sealed corridor without incident. The guards, two bleary-eyed prefects, and a yawning caretaker's cat were exactly where Lily had predicted. Pacing the far end of the hall, Finn uncorked the invisibility draft with trembling hands, and we each took a careful sip. The world shimmered around us, our outlines fading to nothingness. And then we moved. The wards on the patched-over breach were stronger than I expected, humming with layered charms meant to repel, confuse, and misdirect. But Lily had done her homework. With a whispered incantation and a precise flick of her wand, she unraveled the first layer. Finn handled the second, his hands shaking as he traced a rune pattern we'd copied from a centuries-old text. And I, heart hammering, breath shallow, pressed my palm against the stone, and whispered a counterspell I didn't fully understand, but somehow knew would work. There was a soft click, not a sound so much as a sensation, and the stone shimmered before dissolving into mist. The way below was open. A spiral staircase descended into darkness, its steps slick with age and lined with faintly glowing runes. Cold air rushed up from the depths, carrying with it a smell that was older than anything I'd ever known. Damp earth, rusted iron, and something faintly sweet, like the memory of a potion brewed centuries ago. My wand light barely pierced the gloom as we began our descent. The the sound of our footsteps swallowed by the vastness below. The further we went, the stranger it became. The walls here weren't like the rest of Hogwarts, not smooth and polished, but rough-hewn, carved from ancient stone, shot through with veins of glimmering crystal. The runes grew denser, their meanings tangled and complex, telling stories of magic so old it predated the school itself. And then there were the sounds, faint at first, then clearer, the echo of dripping water, the distant rustle of something shifting in the dark, and beneath it all, the whispering. It was louder here, filling the tunnels like a living presence, and for the first time I could make out fragments of words, not in English, not in any language I knew, but somehow understandable all the same. Bound, sealed, waiting. Lily grabbed my arm. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. I nodded. Finn swallowed hard. "Maybe we should turn back," he muttered. "We've seen enough." But none of us moved. We had come too far, and whatever was down here was too important to leave behind. The staircase ended at a vast stone door, towering twice our height and etched with thousands of glowing sigils. Chains, thicker than my arm, snaked across it, pulsing faintly with light, and in the center, carved deep into the surface, was a single emblem. A circle split into 4 equal parts, each containing a symbol I recognized from the house crests: a lion, a serpent, a raven, and a badger. It was a seal, one forged by the founders themselves. "This is it," Lily breathed. "This is what's been calling." We stood there in silence, the enormity of what we were facing pressing down on us like the weight of the earth itself. The whispers swirled around us, faster now, more desperate. The air was heavy with magic, wild, ancient, alive. And as I stepped closer, reaching out towards the seal, a thought crossed my mind so sharply it nearly stopped me in my tracks. What if it's not locked to keep something in, but to keep us out? Up close, the great door radiated power. It wasn't just ancient, it felt alive, thrumming faintly beneath my fingertips like a slumbering heart. The carvings that ringed its surface weren't just decoration, either. They were spells, wards woven together with precision so intricate that even centuries hadn't weakened them. As my hand brushed against the lion's crest, a pulse of warmth spread through my palm, and I swore I heard a faint roar echoing deep within the stone. The serpent hissed, the raven whispered, the badger hummed softly. For houses, for powers, bound together to hold back whatever lay beyond. Lily studied the runes closely, her brow furrowed in concentration. "This isn't a lock," she murmured, "it's a pact. All 4 houses, all 4 founders. Whatever's behind this door, they sealed it together. Which means," Finn said, his voice unsteady, "that they didn't want it getting out. Or," I countered, "they didn't want just anyone getting in." That was the thought I couldn't shake. Every lesson we'd ever been taught, every story about Hogwarts founders, they'd built this school to protect, to guard knowledge, to teach magic, to guide future generations. And if all 4 of them had worked together to seal something away, then it was either too dangerous to be free, or too powerful to be left forgotten. "Look," Lily said suddenly, pointing to the center of the door. "These sigils, they're incomplete." And she was right. The seal, the circle binding the 4 emblems together, was fractured. Faint lines of dormant runes branching outward from each crest, like veins waiting for blood. "I think," she whispered, "it needs activation." Finn stepped back. "Absolutely not. No way. That's a terrible idea." But my hand was already moving. The whispers around us surged as I reached for the first crest, the lion. The moment my fingers touched the carved stone, warmth flared beneath my skin, racing up my arm and settling deep in my chest. It was more than heat. It was courage, a fierce, unyielding determination that filled every corner of my mind. When I touched the raven next, a sharp clarity flooded through me. Knowledge and focus so intense it felt as though the runes themselves were speaking. The badger pulsed with loyalty, the serpent with ambition. For threads of power weaving together, binding themselves not just to the door but to us. And then the seal began to move. The runes flared to life, flooding the chamber with light. The chains binding the door shuddered and snapped, dissolving into mist. The great stone slabs groaned as if waking from a long sleep, ancient dust billowing into the air as the door slowly creaked open. The ground trembled beneath our feet. A rush of cold, stale air poured out, air that hadn't touched the world above in centuries. And with it came the whispers, no longer distant or fragmented, but loud, layered, and clear. Free at last. The chamber beyond was vast, far larger than any room we'd seen above ground. Its walls were carved from black stone, shot through with veins of gold, and the ceiling stretched high into darkness. At its center lay a circular dais covered in symbols none of us recognized, and upon it rested a pedestal of gleaming obsidian. But what sat on the pedestal was what made my heart stop. It wasn't a creature, it wasn't a weapon. It was a book, bound in dark leather and sealed with thick iron clasps. It radiated a power so intense it seemed to warp the air around it. Runes etched into its cover glowed faintly, pulsing like the slow beat of a heart. Even from across the chamber, I could feel it tugging at me, not physically, but magically, like it was reaching out to my very core. It was as if it knew we were there, as if it had been waiting. Lily took a cautious step forward. "It's a grimoire," she breathed. "A spell book older than the school itself, by the looks of it." Finn's voice was barely a whisper. "Then why seal it away?" "Because," I said, my throat dry. "It's not just a spell book." The air around the pedestal shimmered, and in the flicker of torchlight I thought I saw movement, faint, ghostly figures swirling in the periphery of my vision. Voices layered atop voices, speaking in languages I'd never heard. My wand felt heavier in my hand. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, to seal the door and never return. And yet, I couldn't look away. I took another step forward, and the whispers grew louder. Bearer of will, breaker of seals. Something deep within me, curiosity, destiny, madness, urged me closer. My fingertips brushed the surface of the pedestal, and the book stirred. The runes flared, the iron clasps snapped open, and a wave of magic surged outward, knocking all three of us back. The torches flickered wildly, the ground shook, and from somewhere deep within the chamber, a voice, not whispered, not distant, but booming and alive, spoke a single word: awaken. Then everything went dark. I came back to consciousness slowly, not as if waking from sleep, but as though surfacing from deep water. My lungs ached, my limbs felt heavy, and for a moment I wasn't entirely sure where I was. The air was cold and thick, humming with a strange electric weight. And then memory returned. The chamber, the book, the surge of magic, the voice. I pushed myself upright, wincing as the world swam into focus. We were still in the chamber, though it no longer looked quite the same. The torches burned with a pale silvery light now, casting long shadows that seemed to twist and curl like living things. The pedestal where the book had rested was empty. The grimoire hovered inches above it, suspended in mid-air, its pages fluttering as though caught in a wind that didn't exist. Lines of runes crawled across the floor, pulsing in rhythm with some unseen heartbeat, and the very walls of the chamber seemed to breathe. Lily groaned and sat up beside me. What did we do?" Finn was already on his feet, staring at the floating book in horrified fascination. "We woke it up," he said. Whatever it is, the voice that followed was not like any we'd heard before. It wasn't a whisper or a boom, not speech in the way humans speak. It was inside us, a resonant, layered sound that bypassed ears entirely and spoke directly to the soul. Long have I waited. We froze. The book's pages turned on their own, faster and faster, until they landed on a single spread covered in symbols so complex my mind struggled to hold their shape. The voice spoke again, not threatening, not even angry, just ancient. 1,000 years ago, they bound my knowledge, feared it, locked it away beneath their school of stone and spell. And now the seal is broken. Who are you? Lily whispered. What are you? The answer was less a word and more a sensation, vast, endless, incomprehensible. I am what they would not teach. I am the root of power, the spark beneath magic's skin. I am memory. I am will. It was a grimoire, yes, but not a book in any ordinary sense. It was alive, a sentient artifact, older than Hogwarts itself, older perhaps than wands and schools and even wizarding society. A living record of magic in its rawest form. And now it was free. The world above has forgotten much, the voice continued, but I have not. You have awakened me, and thus you are bound. The circle of 4 is broken, but it can be made whole again. The chamber trembled. Cracks spidered through the floor, glowing with veins of liquid light. The runes pulsed faster. The book rose higher, radiating waves of power that made my wand hum and the very air vibrate. Bound, Finn said, backing away. What does that mean, bound? Your choice has forged a link. My awakening is yours, as your world is now mine. And with that, the chamber exploded. Not literally, not with fire or stone, but with magic. It poured outward in a roaring wave, slamming into us and rushing up the staircase. Through the halls of Hogwarts, into every corridor, every wall, every hidden crevice of the castle. I felt it surge through me, too, a tidal force of raw, unfiltered power that set every nerve alight. And then, almost as quickly as it had come, it was gone, leaving behind a silence so profound it rang in my ears. We stumbled back up the staircase in stunned silence. It was no longer just about curiosity or mystery now. We had unleashed something vast and uncontrollable, and Hogwarts had felt it. The castle was awake. The signs were immediate. Portraits we passed turned their heads to follow us, their eyes sharper and more knowing than before. The suits of armor lining the corridors shifted restlessly, as though straining against invisible leashes. Spells that once required focus and precision now sparked to life with alarming ease. A simple lumos flared into a blinding beacon, and a minor levitation charm hurled a bench 10 feet into the air. Even the staircases moved differently, faster, as though driven by some urgent, invisible logic. And then the whispers returned, not from below this time, but from everywhere. They echoed in the halls, drifted from empty rooms, hummed beneath the floor. Words in forgotten tongues, laughter, warnings, incantations. The very castle was speaking. I think, Lily said, her voice barely a breath, we changed something fundamental. The professors knew it too. By the time we reached the upper floors, the school was in chaos. Teachers shouted orders, spells flew through the air, and students were being herded back into their common rooms. McGonagall swept past us with a look of grim determination, her wand blazing with protective wards. Flitwick and Sprout carried armfuls of glowing crystals. Even Dumbledore's phoenix streaked down a corridor in a trail of scarlet flame. And then came Snape, striding through the chaos like a storm given form. Inside, now, his voice was low, deadly calm. We obeyed without a word. In the common room, we sat in silence, The weight of what we'd done, pressing down like a physical force. None of us spoke. None of us could. And as the castle trembled faintly beneath us, alive, awake, aware, I realized something that chilled me to the core. We hadn't just broken a seal. We had rewritten the rules. The next morning dawned grey and silent, as if the castle itself were holding its breath. Snow still drifted lazily past the windows, but the air felt different, heavier, charged, alive. Hogwarts was awake now, and every stone seemed to know it. Staircases shifted constantly, refusing to hold still. Doors that had stood for centuries swung open of their own accord, while others sealed themselves shut without warning. Portraits spoke in hushed, hurried tones, and even the ghosts floated uneasily through the halls, their normally translucent forms flickering with a strange, silvery sheen. The news spread quickly. Something had happened, something big. Rumors filled the air like smoke. Some said an artifact had been uncovered beneath the castle. Others whispered that a forbidden spell had been unleashed. A few claimed a creature older than Hogwarts itself had awoken in the depths. But no one knew the truth. No one except us. I barely slept. My dreams had been filled with fragments, glimpses of swirling runes, vast chambers of light and darkness, a heartbeat that wasn't my own. And always the voice. The circle is broken, but it may yet be mended. I didn't know what it meant, but I had a sinking feeling we were about to find out. By mid-morning, the summons came. A note appeared on my pillow in elegant, looping script. The headmaster will see you immediately. My heart sank. Lily and Finn received the same note, and the three of us made our way down to Dumbledore's office in tense silence. None of us spoke. What was there to say? We had broken the seal. We had unleashed the grimoire, and now we would have to answer for it. The stone gargoyle guarding Dumbledore's office sprang aside the moment we approached, as if it had been expecting us. The spiral staircase carried us upward, and when the door swung open, we were met with the sight of nearly every major professor in the school gathered inside. McGonagall stood rigid by the fireplace, lips pressed into a thin line. Flitwick sat perched on the edge of a chair, wringing his hands. Sprout's eyes were red, as if she hadn't slept. Snape lingered in the shadows near a tall bookshelf, his expression unreadable. And behind the great claw-footed desk, Dumbledore himself stood with his back to us, gazing out the tall window at the snow-covered grounds below. "Sit," he said softly, without turning. We obeyed. For a long time, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint ticking of a silver clock on the mantel. Then, finally, Dumbledore turned to face us. His expression was not angry. It was worse, tired, grave, and unbearably sad. "You have done something," he said slowly, "that no witch or wizard has dared attempt for nearly 1,000 years." No one moved. My mouth was dry. My hands shook. "You found the seal of the Founders," McGonagall said sharply. "And you broke it." I opened my mouth to speak, to explain, to apologize, but the words tangled in my throat. "We didn't mean," I began, but Dumbledore raised a hand, silencing me. "I do not doubt your intentions," he said gently. "Curiosity is a powerful thing. It is what leads us to knowledge, to discovery, to growth. But it is also dangerous. And in this case, it has unleashed forces that even we do not fully understand." Lily swallowed hard. "The book, it spoke to us. It said it was memory. Will, the root of magic. Indeed," Dumbledore said. "The Codex Primordia, the oldest surviving repository of raw, unfiltered, magical knowledge. It was sealed by the Founders themselves when they realized the danger it posed. Knowledge without guidance can be as destructive as ignorance. Power without restraint is perilous. Then why keep it here? Finn blurted out. Why not destroy it? Because, Dumbledore said, his blue eyes glittering with something I couldn't name. Some things cannot be destroyed. They can only be contained, guided, watched. Snape stepped forward then, his expression colder than the snow outside. And now, thanks to your recklessness, that containment has been compromised. His voice was low, every syllable deliberate. Do you have any idea what you've done? That surge of uncontrolled energy yesterday, it reached beyond the castle. The Ministry felt it. Gringotts felt it. Magic itself is shifting. The room spun. We didn't mean to. No, Snape interrupted, his voice suddenly sharper. Intentions are meaningless now. Severus, Dumbledore said quietly. Enough. Snape fell silent, but the fury in his eyes did not fade. Dumbledore leaned forward, folding his hands atop his desk. The Codex is awake now. It cannot be sealed again, not without its cooperation. And it seems, he said, his gaze settling on me, that it has chosen you. Me. My voice cracked. Why me? Because you opened the seal, McGonagall said. You forged a bond with it. Like it or not, you are now its link to the world above. Where it goes, you must follow. And where you go, it will follow. The weight of her words pressed down on me like a mountain. I hadn't just broken a seal. I hadn't just awakened an artifact. I had bound myself to it. What happens now? Lily asked quietly. Dumbledore sighed. Now, we must prepare. The Codex is ancient, older than this school, older than wizarding society as we know it. Its awakening will draw attention. Some will seek to control it, others will seek to destroy it, and some will seek to use it. He paused, his gaze distant. You three may yet play a part in what's to come. For now, you will remain under close watch. You will attend your lessons, follow your professor's instructions, and you will not, under any circumstances, return to the chamber. There was nothing more to say. We were dismissed. As we left the office, the weight of everything pressed on me like a cloak soaked in ice. The castle hummed faintly beneath my feet. Magic tingled in the air. The Codex was awake, and it was bound to me. Whether I liked it or not, my life had changed forever. And somewhere deep below Hogwarts, in the darkness of the chamber where we had first found it, the book stirred again. Its pages turned without wind. Runes pulsed like a heartbeat. And in the silence of the stone, a single whisper echoed through the halls. The circle will be made whole. The weeks that followed were unlike anything Hogwarts had ever seen. Classes continued, lessons were taught, and life appeared to go on as normal, but nothing truly was. Magic itself had changed. Charms flared brighter and wilder than intended. Potions brewed faster, but their properties were less predictable. Wards that had held for centuries now flickered and pulsed like living things. Even the castle's ghosts seemed restless, their pale faces drawn tight with worry. It was as though the school itself was waking from a long sleep and stretching against the limits of its own walls. And all of it was because of me. I could feel the Codex's presence everywhere now. It pulsed faintly in the back of my mind, a steady rhythm that matched my heartbeat. It whispered in forgotten languages when I closed my eyes. And sometimes, when I cast a spell, I felt its power stir beneath my wand, bending the magic in ways I hadn't intended. It wasn't malicious, not exactly, but it was hungry. Hungry to teach. Hungry to be used. I tried to focus on my studies, to lose myself in the ordinary rhythms of Hogwarts life. But the more I tried to ignore the Codex, the louder its voice became. Learn, it whispered when I read my textbooks. Claim, it urged when I held my wand. And always, beneath the surface, that same refrain, the circle will be made whole. It was on a bitter February morning that everything changed again. I was walking to the great hall for breakfast when the first scream echoed through the corridor, then another, then chaos. Students bolted from classrooms, teachers shouted orders, and a wave of panicked bodies surged toward the main staircase. My stomach twisted. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. I pushed through the crowd with Lily and Finn at my side. "What's happening?" Finn shouted, grabbing a terrified first year by the shoulder. Something came out of the dungeons. The boy gasped before sprinting away. We didn't need to hear more. We ran. The corridors below were a scene of barely contained disaster. The air was thick with dust and raw magic, and the stone floor was splintered and cracked as though something enormous had forced its way through. Professors dueled unseen shapes in the shadows, their spells colliding with bursts of strange, silvery energy that rippled through the air. And then I saw it, a rift in the dungeon wall, its edges glowing with the same golden light I'd seen in the Codex's chamber. From within it poured tendrils of formless, shifting magic, wild, chaotic, alive. Containment breach. McGonagall shouted over the din. All students to their common rooms, now. But we didn't move. We couldn't, because, from the heart of that rift, something was taking shape. At first, it was only light, a swirling, molten mass of it, twisting and folding in on itself. But slowly, painfully, it coalesced into form, a towering figure of shifting runes and liquid fire. Eyes like stars, a body that seemed to be made of pure incantation. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once, a living embodiment of magic itself. And even from across the chamber, I felt the bond snap taut between us. Bearer of will. The voice hissed, not from the creature, but from within me. Your world calls. Will you answer? I stumbled backward, my wand trembling in my hand. What is it? I whispered. The Codex, Lily breathed. It's manifesting. The creature moved forward, and the very air warped around it. Spells thrown by the professors dissolved before touching its skin. Stone melted where its feet touched the ground. And then, impossibly, it spoke aloud, its voice resonating through the chamber like thunder. The circle is incomplete. The bond unstable. Choose, bearer. Will you command me, or will you be consumed? The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me. What is it saying? Finn shouted, but I barely heard him. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might break free of my chest. I understood, on some instinctive level, what the creature meant. The Codex's power was out of balance. It was leaking into the world, uncontrolled, dangerous. It needed a conduit, someone to anchor it, guide it, shape it. And because I had broken the seal, because I had been the one to awaken it, that someone was me. Don't, Lily said, grabbing my arm. If you take it, it could destroy you. If I don't, I said quietly, it could destroy everything else. The creature's gaze fixed on me, brilliant and endless. Despite, time seemed to slow. The noise of the panicking students faded. The spells and shouting and crumbling stone all melted into silence. And in that moment, standing in the shattered heart of the dungeons, I understood what this had always been about. It was never just curiosity. It was never just a mistake. It was a test, not of strength, but of will. I raised my wand. I choose, I whispered. I'll guide you. The chamber exploded with light. It poured into me, raw, ancient, overwhelming. I gasped as the Codex's power flooded through every fiber of my being, burning and brilliant and infinite. Memories that weren't mine flashed before my eyes, spells cast by long-dead witches and wizards. Battles fought centuries before Hogwarts existed, glimpses of the world when magic itself was young. My wand sang with energy, and the creature before me knelt, its body folding into a form less monstrous, more human. "Then rise, bearer," it said, its voice softer now, "and wield what you have awakened." The chaos stopped. The rift's tendrils withdrew. The raw magic that had been spilling into the castle began to stabilize, flowing instead into the bond between the Codex and me. The professors lowered their wands, staring in disbelief. For the first time in weeks, Hogwarts was still, but the cost was immediate. My hands shook with power I could barely contain. My veins burned with something vast and ancient. And deep inside, I knew the truth. This wasn't over. The Codex wasn't a thing you controlled. It was a force you walked beside, and it would demand more from me than I had ever given before. In the days that followed, Hogwarts slowly returned to something resembling normal, or at least a new version of it. The rift in the dungeons was sealed. The wild magic that had swept through the castle calmed, and the Codex's presence, though still thrumming faintly beneath the surface of things, no longer threatened to tear the school apart. Classes resumed, lessons continued. Students whispered and gossiped as they always had. But nothing was truly the same. I wasn't the same. The bond I had forged with the Codex had left its mark on me. My spells were sharper now, surer. My wand felt like an extension of my will, responding to thought with a precision and depth I'd never known before. Even simple charms carried a resonance that made professors raise their eyebrows and classmates fall silent. But it wasn't just power, it was understanding. I saw the layers beneath spells, the hidden architecture of enchantments, the ancient echoes that shaped even the simplest bit of magic. It was like learning to see color in a world I'd thought was only black and white. Yet with that power came a weight heavier than any textbook or cauldron I had ever lifted. The Codex was still awake, still alive inside me, and its whispers had not stopped. They were softer now, patient, almost respectful, but they were there all the same. Guide, learn, shape. It wasn't commanding me anymore. It was waiting for me to decide what kind of wizard I would become. The professors watched me closely. Dumbledore called me into his office more times than I could count, each meeting a mix of gentle questioning and quiet counsel. McGonagall's stern gaze followed me through Transfiguration, though I sometimes caught the faintest glimmer of pride behind it. Even Snape, whose disdain had once been palpable, seemed more cautious now, as if unsure whether to fear me or test me. He never said as much, of course, but one afternoon as I brewed a particularly complex potion, I caught him studying me with an expression that almost resembled respect. "You've bound yourself to something far older and far greater than you," he said softly, as if to himself. "Let us hope it does not devour you." There was no malice in his tone. It was a warning, and he was right to give it. The world beyond Hogwarts had felt the change. Rumors trickled in from the Daily Prophet and late-night staff meetings. Magical anomalies were being reported across Britain. Dormant wards suddenly reactivating. Lost spells resurfacing in old grimoires. Ancient relics pulsing with new light. The Codex's awakening had rippled outward, stirring things long thought forgotten. And somewhere beyond the safety of the castle's walls, people had noticed. Some were curious, others were afraid, and a few, the most dangerous of all, were interested. I spent long nights awake by the common room fire, staring into the flames as my friends slept upstairs. Lily and Finn had stood by me through it all, even when they were terrified, even when they thought I'd gone too far. They were still here, still laughing with me at meals, still complaining about homework and Snape's sarcasm. But I could see it in their eyes sometimes, the question they didn't dare ask. Are you still you? The truth was, I didn't know. And yet, in those quiet hours, I also felt something else. Hope, purpose, a sense that all of this, the fear, the mistakes, the choices, had led me exactly where I needed to be. Hogwarts had always been more than a school. It was a place of discovery, of transformation. And while my journey had taken me farther than most first years could ever imagine, it was still my journey. The Codex hadn't chosen me to rule. It hadn't chosen me to destroy. It had chosen me to learn. And maybe, in time, to teach. The last snowfall of the season came late that year, blanketing the grounds in a soft, silver light. I found myself standing by the edge of the Black Lake one evening, watching the reflection of the castle shimmer on its glassy surface. The stars burned bright above, and for the first time since that day on the train, I let myself simply breathe. Hogwarts loomed behind me, vast and eternal, its windows glowing warmly against the night. It had seen countless generations pass through its halls. It had shaped heroes and villains, legends and ghosts. And now, for better or worse, it had shaped me too. A ripple disturbed the lake's surface, the giant squid waving lazily from the depths. I smiled. Somewhere deep within the castle, I could feel the Codex stir faintly in response, like a heartbeat syncing with my own. "I don't know what you want from me," I whispered into the cold night air, "but I'm ready to find out." The wind carried my words out across the water, and for a heartbeat, I thought I heard an answer, faint, ancient, and full of promise. "Then let us begin." And just like that, the story of my first year at Hogwarts, the year of secrets and seals, of power and choices, came to its end. But in my bones, I knew it wasn't truly over. It was only the beginning. It's strange how the moments that change our lives forever rarely announce themselves. They arrive quietly, disguised as curiosity or coincidence. A door left unlocked, a question asked at the right time, a choice made in the space of a heartbeat. And then, before you even realize what you've done, the course of everything shifts. I was 11 when I opened the seal beneath Hogwarts. I was a boy chasing secrets, desperate to prove I belonged in a world that had once felt too big, too old, too wondrous for me. I didn't understand the weight of the thing I woke. Not then. I only knew that my wand shook when I held it, that the chamber's runes sang beneath my fingers, and that the Codex whispered to me in a language older than memory. I understand now. Years have passed since that night. The world has changed, quietly, subtly, but unmistakably. Magic is wilder now, freer. Spells thought lost to history have resurfaced. Forgotten artifacts stir in their vaults. Ancient bloodlines dream restlessly. The Codex's awakening rippled far beyond the walls of Hogwarts, and its echoes still shape the world I walk through every day. And me. I am no longer the boy who stared, trembling, at the sorting hat, or clumsily waved his wand over a stubborn feather. I have studied in the archives of Alexandria, and walked among the ruins of forgotten magical civilizations. I have spoken words that were never meant to be spoken aloud, seen power that once terrified me, and learned the cost of wielding it. I have made mistakes, so many mistakes, and I have carried the weight of them, like a shadow trailing my every step. Yet, I regret nothing. The Codex has been my greatest burden, and my greatest teacher. It has shown me that magic is not a tool to be mastered, but a living, breathing force that demands respect. It is not about control. It is about balance, about knowing when to reach out and when to step back, when to wield power and when to let it rest. I still feel its pulse beneath my skin, even now. Softer than it once was, not a storm anymore, but a heartbeat, a companion, a reminder. And sometimes, late at night, when the castle is silent and the moonlight spills through my window in silver ribbons, I think back to that first journey, the train pulling away from King's Cross, the boats gliding across the Black Lake, the trembling excitement of being sorted, the chaos of first spells and shifting staircases. I think of the friends I made and the enemies I earned, the secrets I unearthed and the choices that shaped me. It all feels like a lifetime ago. Perhaps it was. But one truth remains, unshaken by time or memory. The Codex is not done with me. Its whispers still reach me, faint and patient, reminding me that our work, our purpose, is far from complete. There are still mysteries left unsolved, spells left uncast, forces beyond even its ancient knowledge still waiting to be discovered. And so I write this, not as a warning, but as a testament to the boy I was, to the wizard I've become, to the power I once feared and now call a friend. The world is changing again. I can feel it in the air, in the tremble of the earth beneath my feet, in the way the stars seem to burn a little brighter at night. And when the time comes, when the next door stands before me, sealed and waiting, I will open it, because that is what I do, because that is who I am. I am the bearer of will, the keeper of memory, the student and the steward of the Codex. And this is only the beginning. If you made it all the way to the end of this story, first of all, thank you. Seriously, it means the world that you tuned in and followed along from that very first moment on the Hogwarts Express, all the way to the awakening of the Codex and beyond. This project started as a small idea, a what-if story about a student's first day at Hogwarts, and it's grown into a full magical saga filled with mystery, power, friendship, and destiny. And it wouldn't mean nearly as much without you here to share it. Let's take a moment to recap everything we just experienced together. It all began with that unforgettable train ride, leaving behind the Muggle world and stepping into a new life full of spells, enchanted staircases, floating candles, and talking portraits. We watched as our main character was sorted into their Hogwarts house, forged their first friendships, and faced the challenges of their first magical lessons, from the thrill of levitating a feather to the terror of Professor Snape's dungeon classroom. But things quickly grew bigger than ordinary school life. Whispers of forbidden corridors, strange runes, and ancient secrets beneath the castle pulled them, and us, deeper into a mystery that had been sealed away for centuries. And then, in a single moment of curiosity and courage, they broke the seal of the Founders and awakened the Codex, a living, ancient force of magic itself. From there, everything changed. Magic shifted. Hogwarts stirred. The professors confronted them, and in the heart of the chaos, our protagonist had to make the hardest choice of all: to embrace the Codex's power and become its guide, or risk watching it destroy everything they cared about. In the end, they accepted that responsibility, forging a bond that would shape not only their future, but the future of the magical world itself. And years later, looking back, they understood what that choice truly meant, that their journey wasn't just about spells and classes. It was about destiny, about purpose, about who they were meant to become. Now, I want to hear from you. Which part of the story was your favorite? Was it the excitement of the first day at Hogwarts, the mystery of the hidden chamber, the chaos of the Codex's awakening, or maybe the reflective epilogue, when everything came full circle? Let me know down in the comments. I read every single one, and I love seeing which moments connected with you the most. And if you enjoyed this magical journey, it would mean so much if you'd take a second to drop a like on this video. It really helps more people discover the story. While you're at it, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future episodes. Trust me, we're just getting started, and there's so much more magic to come. Thank you again for being part of this world. for watching, imagining, and dreaming alongside me. Until next time, keep believing in the power of stories. Keep exploring the magic in the everyday, and remember, every great adventure starts with a single choice. I'll see you in the next one.